Good morning, everyone. This is Mark Chubahusky with MCZ Align, and this is Align Health Insights podcast number 7 with my good dear friend, Karthik Sriram. Hello, Karthik. Please tell the audience a little bit about yourself.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks for having me here. As Mark said, my name is Karthik Sriram. I work as VP of FP&A at Parabolas Medicines. We are a biotech company based in Boston, in the Alewife area. So I've worked in the biotech and pharma space for the last close to 18 years. So it's been an exciting ride for me so far, seeing all the ebbs and flows of the industry. And I think we are at a critical juncture here with everything that's happening in biotech. So happy to be here, Mark.
I'm happy to have you. We had this whole list of questions, and then Karthik and I were talking before we got this podcast started, and I was saying, look, my audience generally knows me for all the stuff that MCG Align does in healthcare technology, but we have a high density of relationships with biotechnology stakeholders as well, and have done a bunch of work there. And it's been a really, let's just say, tough year for biotech. Worst funding year in a decade. Uh, if we look at the 10-year Treasury yield curve as an example, in the biotechnology index, they're completely inverted. So it's really hard for people to really want to throw money in. And there's all sorts of other factors as well. Uh, the touch point here is that there's going to be, I guess Karthik is going to tell us, this confluence of how biotechnology companies are going to be using technology to really lower the cost of development and so many other things that make this, even though it's a space that's been kicked in the or punched in the stomach uh, as of recent, really still very an exciting place to be and invest. So, Karthik, I'd love to hear some thoughts there.
Yeah, so biotech has definitely been, the frequently used term in the industry has been that it's been nuclear winter since 2022. And I personally saw the kind of peaks. So at my previous job, my company went public in 2021,
Century.
where
Yeah.
there was generally euphoria in the markets, right? Um, in the sense that it was kind of the COVID times, and people were seeing how great the impact of biotech could be on human beings, right? These
Yeah.
vaccines were getting fast tracked. I think there was generally a lot of positive sentiment in that time frame, and I think it was reflected in companies' valuations. And as with everything, right? Like when times are good, we kind of go too far sometimes, and I think that's what happened with biotech. So you saw that there are multiple companies doing very similar things, and there was a lot of crowding, right? Like how
Yeah.
many is do you want to be doing the same particular idea, right? So there were lots of companies that were funded, and as you can imagine, every bubble pops, and that the same thing happened in biotech. But I think what also kind of created the perfect storm for biotech was beyond this usual market correction cycle, which every industry goes through.
Yeah.
I think the last 3 years, I think there have also been other geopolitical and factors that have kicked in.
Hmm.
One of it has been China has invested a lot into biotech because they always felt like they were the younger brother to America's biotech industry. And again, honestly, biotech has been one of America's like leading kind of areas, right? Like we've brought so many therapies to patients in the world that we even in spite of this nuclear winter, I still believe that America is the biotech leader, right? So
Yeah.
given that perspective, I think China has aggressively tried to catch up to us, and that is having an impact on the industry as well, because some of the investors are thinking, "Hey, why should I be investing in a place where the cost of research is higher? Can I kind of reduce my risk by going and investing in companies in China where it's cheaper to get a therapy to market?" So that's had a huge impact. And I think generally the third thing has also been because biotech had such a resurgence in popularity in
Yeah.
2020 and 2021, there are more people who are asking questions now, right? And again, it depends on where
Yeah.
you fall on how you see about these things. But I generally think people asking questions is a good thing, right? Because, hey, I
Oh
want to
yeah.
know what it takes to develop a drug for, for the flu vaccine, right? I generally believe asking questions are a good thing. And I think
Hmm.
that, but what has happened is that people asking questions has put some uncertainty over investors, right? Like, hey, is this a good industry to invest in? So many people are
Yeah.
asking questions. So I think all of this have kind of contributed to where the industry is right now.
Yeah.
But the one thing I'll tell you is biotech is never for the faint-hearted. It's an industry where a lot of drugs, don't make it to the market, right?
Yeah.
So most people working in biotech companies are optimistic by nature. You cannot be a pessimist and work in biotech, right? That's just
Yeah.
not feasible. So I think that, it's always darkest before the dawn, and
Yeah.
I believe that the dawn is not far away for biotech.
Yeah. We definitely need more unreasonable people. They are the ones that really create the paradigm shifts, right? So, uh, can you walk us through your journey from your early career in life sciences to becoming a strategic leader at Parabolas Medicine, and really to hone in, like what key experiences shaped your approach to biotech growth in oncology?
Got it. Hey, and the answer to this is going to seem like it's a very cliched answer, right? But I
Right.
think
Yeah.
as you walk through life, things happen to you in that time frame. You do not understand how it's impacting you, and
Hmm.
sometimes you realize the impact of a particular event that happened many decades ago, much later in your life, because
Yeah.
it subconsciously impacted you, right? So the fact that I'm here today, 2025, I'm working in a biotech company. I think the seeds of that. Um, or the primary seed of that, I think, was planted when my grandfather, who was living with us when I was growing up, he was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer
Oh my goodness.
in like early 2000. And what happened was, he obviously like loved me to heaven and earth, right?
Yeah.
And then I was very close to him as well, and I saw that from diagnosis to when he passed away, unfortunately, in 6 months. This was a guy that was, like, well built, very a commanding physical presence. He ended up basically being a shell of himself, right?
Yeah.
And I saw, because I was living with him, I saw the entire kind of slope, as I would call it. At that point, I was obviously impacted, like, oh my god, my grandfather is just breaking down in front of my eyes. It was more the emotional component of it. But somewhere in that experience, I really wanted to see, like, hey, how can I do something that's going to create some impact, right? And so in India, when I was in high school, I really wanted to go do some basic engineering. I was not a great biology student at that point, so I picked up something in engineering, did my degree in electrical engineering to get
Yep.
a good basis there, and then I pivoted to biomedical engineering. I did my master's in University of South Florida, and I focused a lot on on research that focused on detection of diseases. Right, one of the projects that I worked on was incidentally funded by the U.S. government, which was focused on identifying biomarkers to help soldiers who are injured on the field to have a way to detect early on if they have a serious injury, right? Because a lot of times these soldiers, they have some impact, they don't have any outward injury, and then they show up to the base and they just collapse. You've heard a few stories like this.
Yeah.
So the US government was very focused on, like, detecting some of these things early so that you can help these soldiers. These are people who are putting their lives on the line for the country. The least we can do is help them, kind of know when they've
Yeah.
been injured. And then when I graduated with my master's, that was when the US economy started tanking. So I had a couple of job
Yeah.
offers that got rescinded, not the pleasantest of experiences. But I always think that life has its own way of working out. As I said, I am an optimist.
Yeah. You
So I
are.
ended up getting a job with a consulting company that wanted someone who understood, like, med tech and drug development, who could work with companies, helping them with process improvement work. So I was doing that for a while, and as I was doing that, I enjoyed working in pharma, medtech, and biotech, right? I got to know so much. I learned so much. I think that everyone who's graduating should at least do a few years in consulting, because you learn so much. It's almost
Yeah.
like it's an accelerated, like, 3 year, 4 year, 5 year kind of experience, where you learn so much because you're working with so many different companies. You see so many different business models. It was a great learning experience. But somewhere around that line, I wanted to start a family, and the consulting lifestyle, as you probably know, is
Yeah.
not meant for people who who are going to be traveling every week.
No.
So given that, what really appealed to me was biotech, because I saw the impact that biotech was having on people. Right, it was around the time that Dendrion, if you remember that company, they had a approved product called Provenge, which was actually approved because the patients, like, camped outside the FDA offices and said, "Hey, this drug is really working, even though the clinical data is not as conclusive. We want this drug to be approved." So I was really kind of touched by that, and in general, like, with my grandfather's kind of death in the back of my mind, I felt that biotech was kind of the closest I could get to working in oncology and helping oncology patients. So
Yeah.
given that, help me make that pivot to working in house in a biotech company, I enrolled in my MBA program at Wharton. They had this program meant for working professionals that didn't want to take 2 years off from school. I was scarred by my experience of graduating my first master's in a really tough economy. So I
Yeah.
didn't want to like take time off from work. So I went through the program, and I was lucky enough that the program helped me make that pivot. I ended up getting my job at Amicus Therapeutics. They are a rare disease company. They currently have 2 approved products on the market. And my first CFO, Chip, who's till recently the CEO of 270 Bio, he took a huge swing on me, right? Hey, Karthik, you've never worked in finance, but I think you have all the attributes that I think you'll be successful in a finance organization. He was kind enough to bring me into Amicus to lead their long range planning, and that's the strategic finance person. And the one thing I've been extremely lucky in my life is that I've had the chance to work with really smart and kind people, right? It's not often
Yeah.
that those qualities go together, but I've been
Yeah.
super lucky to have that combination consistently. So at Amicus, I worked with a great set of people in finance and even in the broader organization. I helped them put together their first long range plan, which was a really eye opening experience for the entire company, right? Because they were all making these small decisions here and there. To see them all put together and come like this is what our next 5 years are going to look like was a significant kind of epiphany for the company in some ways. And then you know, working at Amicus, I know I kept saying oncology, but it was such an eye opening experience to work in a rare disease company, because if you think someone going through cancer is heartbreaking, I strongly recommend you talk to a rare disease patient, right? Especially kids who are unfortunately afflicted with these rare diseases. And a lot of times, because they are rare diseases by definition, they are not diagnosed at the right time. And there are these kids. So there was one occasion where a kid showed up to our offices. We used to have these patient outreach programs. A kid showed up to our office and basically said, hey, my favorite color is blue. I'm no longer able to see colors because of my disease, but I implore you to find a cure so that no other child has to not see their favorite color. Again, even recounting it, it's tough to not break down. I have two
Oh
young
my
kids of
God.
my own. So to me, I was so lucky that I ended up working in rare disease where I was able to see like, oh my God, we think we work in finance and we don't have an impact on patients. We do, right? Every single thing that a pharma or a biotech company does impacts patients. And I was able to see that there.
Wow.
And after that, I ended up working at Century Therapeutics, along with someone who worked with me at Amicus, Mike Diem, who's pretty popular in the Philadelphia area. So he and I worked at Century where we were pursuing therapies, allogeneic therapies for oncology. And again, it was an amazing experience to work in such cutting edge science where you're taking these cells from healthy patients and putting them into sick patients. And I could see the opportunity, right? But it was just kind of bad timing that the market just
Hmm.
turned, and the investor appetite for like really like advanced therapies, kind of dimmed a little bit. And but I think as my lucky streak continued, I ended up finding a role here at Parabolas Medicines, where I'm super lucky to be here. There's a great management team here focused on bringing efficacious and affordable therapies to patients, and I'm happy to be a part of the journey here as well.
That's amazing. Man, everything you said, it really comes down to people, right? Whether it be in your job and working with really competent and just foundationally good human beings to helping others. And it's really been the backbone of your story. And, starting with your grandfather, which I had a aunt who passed from pancreatic cancer in 1996, who was my mom's twin sister and my godmother. And I remember those times vividly when, she would just stop eating and it was just heartbreaking. So, um, yeah, I'm really glad that
Any
you're doing this
cancer,
work.
yeah, any cancer I think is tough. My mom, unfortunately has been going through some cancer
I know,
treatment
you
last
know,
year. I think any cancer is tough on the patient and also on their family. But I think to me, like the two cancers that kind of give me nightmares are pancreatic cancer and GBM. Part of
yeah,
my goal, at least within my lifetime, is that we do find, cures for those two cancers where patients can at least count on living at least like 7 to 8 years. Right now for GBM, it's a few months, right? Your survival. I'm hoping that within my lifetime we can get there as an industry.
yeah. We had a friend that their father was diagnosed with glioblastoma on Father's Day, and then he died 6 weeks later this summer. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, look, glad you're doing this work. It's truly inspiring. Can you give us a high level overview of the Helicon Discovery Platform and how it, engineers stabilize helical peptides, to, target undruggable cancer proteins that
Sure.
traditional molecules, I guess, can't reach, right? So,
Yeah, yeah. Part of the reason I took this job at Parabolas is because of their really interesting and cool science, right? So helicons, which are basically alpha helices, they are kind of a wonder of nature, as I would call it, right? Because they have this like coil structure that gives them some unique drug-like properties, right? And the key thing that this structure and their properties give them is this ability to cross cell membranes, right?
hmm,
So at the get-go, what makes Helicon special is this ability to kind of cross through cell membranes so you can reach intracellular targets, right? Our CEO, Matai, keeps saying that there is this, a wall of shame of these undruggable targets. And we at Parabolis believe that our Helicons give us a way to kind of drug these what are traditionally seen as undruggable targets. And what helicons also do is they combine two known kind of methods of action, like or two known therapeutic classes, right? Anti-monoclonal antibodies and small molecule drugs. They kind of combine the advantages of both, right? So, like small molecules, they do have cell permeability and there is broad tissue distribution of the drug, which is great to improve efficacy, right? And then like antibodies, they have like really specific ability to bind to like a particular
yep,
surface that allows them to be very targeted, right? So
yep,
having worked for like cell and gene therapy companies, to me it's like really interesting to kind of work for a hybrid company that takes like a small molecule idea but has like the precision of what I would call like an antibody technology.
yeah, yeah,
And the last thing is because of the vast kind of tunability of helicons, like you can basically design these helicons for specific indications that you're going after. And there's a lot of data sciences that we use to do that as well. We believe that we can come up with these like really optimized physical properties, right? For example, like, hey, for this target we need this molecule to be super soluble, right? We can kind of design a molecule that way. I think these are primarily the three things that makes our Helicon platform really powerful, and in my opinion, a great platform for drug development.
wow, that's really exciting, really exciting. Uh, so, just to shift topics really quickly, and thinking about young professionals that are aspiring to lead in biotech strategy and finance. What advice would you offer based on your career and current role?
Got it. So I'm going to, my feedback is going to come towards people who want to make their career in finance and biotech, right? So it's a very tailored answer for that. My strong recommendation is, you know, um, grow a curiosity for the science and biology in general. Because with AI coming in, a lot of what you would call traditional finance skill sets in FP&A are kind of you can do it like in a few minutes using AI, Chat GPT, right? Like last week, I built a model that would have usually taken me like 2 days. I was able to do it like in half an hour using AI. So,
Wow.
I'm not to say that oh my god, all finance jobs are going to go away. That's not. I'm not as I keep telling you, I'm an optimist. I don't think that's ever going to happen. But I believe that for you to be an effective finance person in a biotech or a pharma company, you need to have an interest in the science, right? Like, hey, what is our platform doing? Why is it special, right? Why does it matter to the patient at the end of the day? Everyone
Yeah.
working in a biotech company, pharma company, your ultimate goal is to get these therapies to patients, right? Without patients, without helping the patients, why are we even showing up to work every day? So,
Yep.
given that, you really need to have an interest in that. Because once you have that interest in science and what the company is doing scientifically,
Yeah.
the rest of the skills automatically follow, right? So I think that to me is the key thing. Don't just rely on, oh my God, I've done a lot of financial modeling in my investment banking days, or I've done a lot of modeling at this job. So I think that makes you a great candidate, right? To get into the door. But what will allow you to thrive and succeed in the job is having that interest in science, is in understanding the disease areas, kind of spending time on that. And usually people coming with a finance background, it's tough to kind of get that science, right? It's not easy. There's a lot of jargon. And that is where I would tell you that the AI is your friend. So if someone uses a technical term that you are not familiar with, just use Chat GPT, right? Understand it. And then you
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
always go to a scientist in your company and ask them like, hey, I heard this term, I looked it up and I didn't understand the entirety of it. Can you explain it to me? Right. And people are always,
Yeah.
happy to explain things to you.
I think it's really what you're saying at the end of the day is you've got to have the solid foundation and the first principles thinking of someone in finance, but you really have to match that up with a real passion and love for the science.
Correct.
Right. So it really comes down to choosing things that you really are interested in and going to enjoy learning about. Um, yeah. Okay. So your mission focuses at Parabolas Medicines on value creation. How do you measure success beyond traditional financial returns, especially in the context of unlocking undruggable targets for cancer patients?
Yeah. So as I just said, most people that I know that work in biotech are not here, meaning, don't get me wrong, we all want to make money, right? Like we have bills to pay, we have kids to put through
Yeah.
college, whatnot. But I think most people working in biotech, that's not their only motivation. There is a focus on like, hey, I want to make something better for patients. I want to make something better. There's a personal, kind of drive that's there. So given that, working in finance and biotech, you're not typically doing the same analysis that you do in any other industry, right? Like you're looking at return on invested capital, or looking at like, other like usual financial metrics, right? The ultimate goal for us is, are we making the right investments that are going to either help bring therapies faster to patients, or are they going to make therapies cheaper for patients, right? Because I think that's a term, or that's a idea that's kind of
Yeah.
gaining more traction right now, because we are seeing like, hey, the world is an oyster, right? There are so many patients. For example, one of our indications that we are pursuing a therapy for is colorectal cancer.
Yeah.
The number of people suffering from colorectal cancer globally is just staggering, right? But then if you develop a drug that's like $1 million drug, how many of those patients can really afford to get that drug? You kind of
Hmm.
limit the number of the patient access to it. So
Yeah.
to us, that those are the two things that kind of honestly, those are the two things that are my first two metrics, right? Every decision are we making? Are we accelerating the pathway for the drug from a financial perspective, right?
Yeah.
Can I, in some ways, it's like adding fuel to the fire, right? Like, can we do something that's going to make this program go faster? Is it
Yeah.
whether it's, kind of hiring people to facilitate work being done in parallel, or working with multiple kind of external agencies, like external vendors, to kind of do things in parallel at risk? And again, are you taking smart risks as well, right? You don't just take risks because you can, but you need to have a hypothesis like, hey, I know it's a risk, but I think it's going to work out because I believe in A, B, and C, right?
Yeah.
um, and then also kind of thinking about like, hey, am I helping bringing the cogs of this drug down? Are we investing in the right technology, right? Are we investing in the right manufacturing process that's going to bring the cost to a point where it's going to be affordable, and we don't have to negotiate with each country to kind of get a good pricing on that? So those are the two things that we do, which is typically not what people think when you tell them that you're working in finance in a biotech company. They usually think that you're focused on cash burn, you're focused on like, hey, your valuation. Those are all important, don't get me wrong. As you're a private biotech company, you're raising money, those things do matter. Cash burn does
Yeah.
matter, your valuation does matter. But at the end of the day, what our North Star for most people working in finance and biotech is, are we bringing therapies faster and cheaper to patients?
That's great. That's great. We certainly need more cheap therapies, especially targeted therapies. Right. I
Yeah,
mean,
and
look.
the one thing I would also tell you is, part of my work in valuation is, we kind of risk adjust everything, right? Because there is this idea that, hey, the drug may or may not work because it's science, we don't know. And then, even when you have the drug approved, you don't know how the market is going to take it, right? Like, if it'll be a
Hmm.
blockbuster drug or not a blockbuster drug.
Hmm.
So we usually use these things called ENPVs, which is basically net present value of that program, but adjusted for some of these risks. But one of my managers used to say, "Hey, Karthik, you either have a drug or you do not." Like ENPV is just like made
Right.
up like voodoo math, because it's just like, you're creating something out of nothing. So at the end of the day, we want to get to a point where we have a real drug. So how can we accelerate to that point where we know whether we have a real drug or not that's going to help patients, is the key thing that we strive for.
That's awesome to hear, honestly. Okay. So from your leadership perspective, what skills or qualities are essential for building a finance and strategy team that can really thrive in this like fast evolving biotech industry?
So I already spoke to you about the science, right?
Yep.
The You have to be a science forward person, have an
Hmm.
interest, be open to learning scientific concepts and scientific jargon. Since I explained that in detail, I'll go to this. It is to
Yep.
me the first one, but I've already spoken about it.
Yep.
So the second one I would say is, and I think you hinted at this, right? There's a people component to the job.
Hmm.
Usually, finance people, if you kind of ask ChatGPT, like, what's the stereotype of a finance person? The answer that it spits out is like a person sitting in a room, not talking to people,
Yep.
kind of working in their own kind of world. That is exactly like what doesn't work in biotech, right? For me, at least. You got to be a people person. You need to go talk to people. A lot of times I learn new things, not in like structured meetings, but in the break room, right? I'm having coffee with a person working in the biology team, and they'll be like, "Hey,
Yeah.
Karthik, did you hear this? Like, we got this data, and it looks fantastic." And like, and then they kind of open this conversation, and I learn like, "Oh my god, I didn't even know that we are doing that." So a lot of it is kind of being able to cultivate relationships across the company, and
Yep.
being able to not just speak finance, but also speak some of the science, which the
Yep.
first thing I told you
Yep.
helps you to do, right? And
Hmm.
then the third thing is, there is this desire, or there's this natural human tendency to say like, oh my god, I've worked on deals that brought in like 500 million to the company, or $1 billion to the company. Those are great things, and they do help the company. But I think ultimately you sink or swim with the company, right? you could
Mm.
you could do a
Yeah.
fantastic job managing your burn. You could do a fantastic job raising money, but if the science doesn't work, the company fails. Like, that's just the nature of the business. So at the end of the day, don't think of this as like, hey, what am I doing? Change
Yeah.
it to like, what are we doing as a company, right? Like, is my success directly contributing to the company's success, right? I think that's a mindset that I think is not just for biotech, and it's there in most industries. But given the failure rate in biotech, I would say that you need to think about that, right? Like, there is no
Yeah.
personal success. It's about like what's happening for the patients that makes the company successful.
I think it's a really marketable framework too, just to say like, okay, here is the overarching goal for the organization. Here's what success looks like for the organization, and then getting and backing into net contributions of how I affected that overall goal. Right? I mean, still is a very good way to look at a really good resume. From a talent perspective. Uh, but I hear what you're saying. That's really great. So, in your opinion, how are recent breakthroughs in biotech, such as next gen sequencing, as an example, expected to influence personalized medicine strategies in the coming year?
Yeah, great question, right? And incidentally, like in my previous job, I really saw how NGS kind of made more expensive therapies, like research cheaper, right? I saw that at Century Therapeutics, where we used a lot of genomic sequencing. And I also think that there are like platform companies that are in play right now, right? Like Illumina or Oxford, that are actually making this like what would be like whole genome sequencing faster, cheaper. That it's no longer so expensive for a cell therapy company or a gene therapy company to kind of get off the ground, because you can lean on all these technologies that are out there, right? But personally, and again, this is Karthik soapbox here. So I think
Yeah,
the one
fair.
thing I'll tell you is, I personally feel that there was this kind of trend towards personalized medicine, like, after like 2015 till recently. I believe that in the end, right now, the trend is more shifting towards like away from personalized medicine to more towards like, hey, what are these therapies that I can get to patients faster? And technology is helping us there, right? The data sciences, to me, like one single area that's made a significant improvement to biotech, I would say, is like data sciences and engineering, right? There has been so much progress. Again, it's all also driven by like the advances in general in AI, but in particular for biotech, it's helping you identify biomarkers faster, right? It's helping you identify these patient populations that you can address faster. So previously, companies are going after personalized medicine because they didn't have this data analysis capability. They knew this one gene, that was causing this issue, so they were going towards that. But now, with more data analysis that you have, or data tools that you have, you can kind of quickly isolate, like, hey, within this entire spectrum of, let's say, lung cancer patients, there is this 20% that are going to have this biomarker that I can go towards, because I know that my drug is going to be impacted by that biomarker. So I think is the trend. It's somewhere in between personalized medicine and mass market medicine, but it's kind
Mm.
of going after these, like, patient subpopulations, as they call it, and getting these therapies there faster. And I think, to me, more than, I think genomic sequencing in some ways, I think, is getting under the data sciences place. But I think that entire industry is revolutionizing biotech, in my opinion.
Yeah, very interesting. Very interesting. I like your take. Reflecting on your 15 years in the industry, what's one leadership lesson you've learned that you think is critical for other oncology biotech leaders facing today's challenges?
I have a shirt that says that. Unfortunately, I didn't wear it today. There is a shirt that I have that says, "Science does not care for your feelings." Um, So a lot of times in biotech companies, the toughest decision, it's easy to manage a biotech company when things are going well. The
Yeah.
tough part is very obvious, right? I'm stating the obvious here. It's tough to make decisions that are not popular decisions, right? Like, hey, this
Hmm.
therapy is no longer working. We need to stop the trial and close the company and return money back to investors. That is a really tough decision. It impacts so many
Yeah.
people's jobs, and it weighs heavily on an executive, right? But I think sometimes in the grand scheme of, like, helping patient population, keeping the industry kind of sustainable, sometimes you have to make those decisions, right? And a
Yeah.
lot of times doing that is tough, and it just doesn't come naturally to me, right? I think we see that even in our personal life. There are times when a particular relationship is not the best for you, but you still kind of persist in it because you have these like personal
Yep.
connections.
Yep.
And for a lot of people, biotech companies are their labor of love, right? Like
Hmm.
they've kind of
Hmm.
seen this company from an idea in someone's head to actual people sitting in seats and doing these like
Yeah.
wonderful research activities and putting these drugs into patients through clinical trials.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's very tough to kind of make that decision, right? But I think the sooner you can come to the conclusion. So one of the things that I've had, my current CEO tell me, my previous, former leaders tell me is, can you get to that, what kills this program decision faster, right? So can you prioritize those kind
Hmm.
of like experiments, or those, patient that the patients you're dosing, can you dose those patients first so you know whether, hey, is it good to continue this program or not? Because there's an obvious financial side to it where you are investing money in a program that maybe does not deserve that investment. But let's leave that aside. These are patients that are signing on to a clinical trial, that are signing on because, like, hey, I think this is going to give me a lease of hope, that I can spend
Yep.
few more months with my kids. I can maybe see my granddaughter's graduation or whatever it is. You don't want to give them false hope, right? Like,
Nope.
so you should think about, like, hey, if I have a feeling that this drug is not working, you owe it to the patients. You should just stop the trial and close, whatever, like pivot away, right? Whether it involves returning money back to investors or pursuing some other idea, whatever it is, we should do that faster. That's my one
Yeah.
lesson learned in my 15
I lo-
years.
I think that's a great lesson learned. Very, very, very powerful. Okay, so we're going to switch topics to you being the president of the Wharton Club of New Jersey. Um, what inspired you to take that role, and how was it? How's it influenced your approach to building strategic networks in the biotech and life sciences community?
Yeah, so very similar to how I told you about my grandfather being the seed that in my
Yeah.
life. I think Wharton was definitely a seed. It was much later in my life, but I think my 2 years at Wharton maybe shaped me as a person that I didn't expect going in, right? And again, everyone says this, right? But for me, walking into Wharton as like a person with very little finance, knowledge, and walking out on the other side, just being able to appreciate all the complexity, right? Again, I don't want to claim that I suddenly became like super smart or whatever it is. That is, that may or may not be true. But my appreciation for how complex stuff is was definitely something I didn't expect walking into art in. So that was definitely a life-changing experience for me. And the one thing I will tell you is, when I did, enroll in the program, I didn't have as much white hair, and I had more hair as well. A lot of my gray hair and a lot of my hair loss may be directly related to how stressful the program was, but I would not change one thing about it, right? It was definitely transformational for me. Very, very valuable 2 years of my life. So I feel that I've gotten a lot out of Wharton, right? And for me, it will always, I always believe in, like, there should be a give and take, right? Like, just taking itself. There was this Adam Grant tweet from a few years ago where he wrote an op-ed in New York Times where he said, your network is only as valuable as the value that you add to the network, right?
Mm.
And it's when you think about it, it's such a it almost seems like common sense, but it is not, right? So to me, it's the same thing. I've gotten so much out of Wharton. What can I do to kind of
Hmm.
repay some of that into the
Yeah.
community, right? So when I graduated, the Wharton Club of New Jersey was doing great. The team was doing a fantastic job, and then I started pitching in, helping them, kind of with their membership initiatives and whatnot. And then I saw that, hey, these are the same people that have been like bearing the burden for the last so many years. So I felt like, hey, the least I could do is kind of take on a more active role. So when Susan Goldsmith, who was the president before me, she was thinking of retiring, she did a lot of great work for the team. And she's just at a point of time in her life where she needs to prioritize, her personal life, and she wants to step away. She wants to retire from her job as well. And I was like, hey, no one else volunteered. So in some ways I volunteered because I didn't want the club to not be there. I've gotten a lot of value in the Wharton community in New Jersey, which again, a stat for you, Wharton's densest alumni network is in New Jersey. Again,
Really?
if you about, yeah, if you think of, so New Jersey is the most densely populated state in the US, right? So
Yeah.
it doesn't surprise you, but the fact that New Jersey is the most densely populated state, plus it's so close to UPenn, makes it like the densest Wharton alumni network in the country. This,
Wow.
that's the state. So given that, we have around 200 dues paying members in the club, to me, like, that's not enough. So my goal is like, hey, what can I do to bring more people into the club, make it kind of a place for people to interact, right? Post COVID, I think a lot of these alumni clubs, a lot of these social settings have suffered because people's lives have been upended by the pandemic. Before the pandemic, most of us were going to the office 4 or 5 days a week, and we were there from nine to five, whatever it is, and then we usually on the way back go for a social networking thing and come back home. But now I think not many people live that life. A lot of
Hmm.
people are managing dropping kids off at school, working from home, working from office some few days. It's a very hybrid lifestyle that leaves very little kind of space for people to be part of a community, right?
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
part of what my role, working with my great team, right? I've been blessed to have a great team working with me at the club as well, is how do we kind of you know create a community for 2025 and beyond, right, where you accommodate for people kind of being busy and having all these like unpredictability in their lives. So one of the ideas that came up was to have this like club of clubs approach, right, where New Jersey, by its virtue of its geography, it's a state, it's considered a small state, but if you live in the state, you feel like getting from Princeton to Cape May is not a trivial thing. It's actually a pretty bad commute. And a few
Hmm.
months ago, I met someone at Woodcliff Lake, and for me to go from Basking Ridge to that place took me like an hour and 40 minutes. So that kind of led to the realization maybe we want to kind of create a structure of each county has its own like networking group. And then the club is basically like the parent entity that encourages these networks to function, right? So that's a great idea that we thought of. We don't know if it's going to work, but I'm hoping that would help the club kind of adapt to the times that we live in.
Wow, you really seem to love it, and you're giving back, which is amazing. I love that interleaving of the Adam Grant quote. It totally resonates with me. What are you giving to your network? It's just really proportionate to what you're giving back. Um, Sounds like really exciting times. And you're right, this whole hybrid thing, right? It's really changing the way that we meet, and sense of community is so important, really. Uh, so great work. Okay, so back to Parabolas really quick. Where do you see helical peptide therapeutics heading by the end of this decade? And what role will strategic finance play in making it a leading field for cancer treatment?
Yeah. So you might think that I've drunk the Kool-Aid here, right? But I sincerely believe that synthetic peptides are definitely going to, because of their specificity, the ability for us to design like the molecules really to like the tunability I spoke about, and the safety profile for patients. I really think that synthetic peptides are going to be a big thing in oncology, metabolic diseases, and rare diseases, right? And you see that, like in metabolic diseases, like GLP-1 is like having a great impact, right? But there are still ways to go. Like right now, when you have these GLP medications, like you have muscle loss, like and it has some
Yep.
consequences. And I think there's more research in trying to make those things better. And again, in rare diseases, based on my experience at Amicus Therapeutics, a lot of these rare diseases are kind of basically like protein interactions that you're trying to avoid. So I believe that synthetic peptides have a huge role to play. And I also think that the fact that this peptide technology can take advantage of the data sciences and AI change that's happening, right? Because again, in my finance person perspective, so I'm not a scientist here, disclaimer, I think it's much easier to kind of predict or model chemical interactions and biological interactions, right? Because we understand chemistry more. Biology is less well understood than chemistry, in my opinion. So I think synthetic peptides are basically taking a kind of a model that works and applying it to data that actually is suited for that model. If you see places where AI fails, are you're basically taking these AI models and you're applying it to data that is really not complete or it's not suitable for that model, right? I think in synthetic peptides, you're really like kind of, making the perfect match there. And I think I always feel that for companies or technologies that take off, it's not just the technology itself, but it's also like the complementary things that are in place, right?
Hmm.
Think about it. again, I don't want to make the equation directly here, but the way that I see synthetic peptides right now is very similar to how, smartphones developed, right? If you
Yep.
remember, iPhone was not the first smartphone to come to the market. It was, Microsoft had a phone. I think Palm Pilot was there. But I think the key thing that Apple did with iPhone was that all the supporting pieces were there for the iPhone to be super successful, right? I think synthetic peptides is in the same space. I think our understanding of peptides has gotten to a point where we're able to make these like models really work. The ability of AI, like the infrastructure, the chips that we have to do these simulations faster, better, are also there. And I think there is this general push, like in terms of understanding synthetic biology better. So all of these kind of are kind of tailwinds for synthetic peptide space. So I'm a huge believer that it's going to make a huge dent, not just in oncology, but also in rare diseases and metabolic therapeutic areas as well.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, it's kind of like you answered two questions in one for me. So, uh, yeah. How do you approach strategic planning to balance short-term financial pressures with the long-term vision of advancing clinical candidates in the competitive oncology space?
So the one thing I'll tell you is what makes or breaks my job is my management team, right? You want a team, you want a CEO, you want a CFO who believe in like, hey, it is possible to kind of make the right decisions in the short term while
Yep.
building long term value as well, right? And as simple or as intuitive as it seems, there are not many people who feel that way, right? So I'm really lucky to be working in a company where the management team strongly feels like, hey, we can make short-term decisions that also align with our long-term strategy. So there is that philosophical aspect to it that you need the company to believe in that,
Yeah.
right? And the second thing is understanding constraints, right? A lot of times, in companies that engage in like budgeting and long-range planning, you basically sometimes give your budget managers like, hey, you have 10 million to spend this year. That's
Right.
it. Like you go and figure it out, right? And what that does is it kind of takes the agency away from these budget managers or these people who are supposed to be your collaborators, right? You're basically telling them, I'm going to give you this number. I'm not going to tell you how we came up with that number. I'm not really interested in what you're
Yeah.
doing. Just manage to this number, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That
Yeah.
takes the agency away from these managers and it becomes like a chore for them, right? Like they have no
Hmm.
desire to kind of help you out. What I think helps me and my approach, and again, this is not something I came up with. I proudly, imitated other successful people as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is, is kind of working with these budget managers or these like department managers to help them understand, like, hey, these are all the constraints for the company, right? Our cash runway is this. This is what our investors are telling us. This is what we need it to be. So, given all of this, we also have business objectives, right? We want to kind of dose this number of patients next year. We want to move this particular idea that we have in our preclinical research into the clinic. So these are all the constraints that we have. Now tell me what you want to do next year and how we can do things in a way that's going to help us be capital efficient and achieve all of these things together. If you see here, I'm kind of going back to that thing that I told you about, the framework that we spoke about.
Yeah.
It's the people piece of it, right? Honestly, anybody can come up with a long range plan for a company. If like that's what, if you actually see a lot of equity research analysts, that's what they do, right? They'll analyze the company and they put out an analyst report that says like, hey, this is what we feel the company's long term value is, right? But
Hmm.
obviously no two analysts have the same kind of projections or same kind of valuation for the company. So as someone working internally, my goal is to kind of utilize the one resource that all of these external people do not have, which are the people that are working with
Oh my
me.
God. Yeah.
So work with them and help them do the job better, and in return, have them help me do my job better as well.
Makes a lot of sense, Karthik. Can you share an example of a strategic partnership you've helped shape in your career? And how did financial modeling influence the decision-making process?
Yeah. So I can give you two examples, right? So one, in one of my former jobs, there was a desire to build a manufacturing plant, right? And it was because the therapy that we were coming to market with was a very complex, product, and most of the CDMOs were struggling to kind of make that product, right?
Yeah.
So the desire was to build a plant on our own, but then using some financial analysis, we kind of showed to our leadership team, hey, building a plant was just going to be such an onerous capital intensive thing that it might, in the end, it might not even like make sense for us, right? Meaning it could pay off in 10 years, but it's tough to kind of convince public investors to see that picture, right? So
Yeah.
given that we worked on a model where we could, kind of almost have something like as a joint venture with a CDMO, where we kind of have the best of both worlds, where we have
Yeah. Yeah.
dedicated slots with this manufacturer that we control. We don't have to pay a slot fee. We can get things done. But at the same time, we were not taking all the initial capital outlay for the plant, because the implicit understanding was that the CDMO would utilize the unused slots for some other company, right? So they were making money off of that. So to me, like, that was a great way of how I was able to, facilitate a partnership. It was almost like the other way of doing a partnership, right? Usually the partnership idea surfaces and you're justifying the partnership. But
Yeah.
this was a case of where the analysis said, like, hey, you should really consider a partnership. And it worked out
Yeah.
for the company. And now, it's an approved product, helping patients. So that's a great story. And the other thing is, this was also working on how do you, if you are a company that's trying to bring in a completely new modality into your company, right? Let's say you're a small molecule company and you suddenly want to kind of bring in, monoclonal antibodies, modality into your company. Uh, I- we realize that the best way for us to do this, combining business risk and financial risk, was to do a collaboration, right? And especially with an academic institution. So in one of my previous jobs, we kind of wanted to kind of do this, research in gene therapy, which was brand new and so complex. But instead of hiring 50 people internally and kind of doing this on our own, we established a relationship with an academic institution that was just a stone's throw away from our offices. And the great thing was we basically instantly had so much institutional knowledge that we could leverage. So we went after
Wow.
smarter bets, right? Like we didn't make some of the usual mistakes that people did. One of which was building a manufacturing plant for a gene therapy, right? A lot of companies did that. I think you remember, and everyone sold it at such a high discount because no one understood what running a gene therapy manufacturing plant meant. But
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
we were working with this academic institution, the professor we were working with said, like, hey guys, like, you should really think about these things. It's not a trivial thing. It's not like manufacturing
Mm-mm.
some other biologic. It's a really complex thing. And his recommendation was, sometime in the future there's not going to be a supply side constraint, so you should really think about it, right? So
Yeah. Yeah.
to me, like, those are two good examples. I hope that kind of answered your
Oh
question.
my God, they're great. Two bi-directional wins, it sounded like, which is awesome, force multipliers. Okay, look, I'm going to skip ahead a little bit, just because of time, but what trends do you see shaping the future of biotech, and how is Parabolas Medicines positioning itself within those trends?
Yeah, so two things, right? One, I think data science is going to play a bigger and bigger role. Right now, it's impacting, as I said, things like peptides, where you have a better understanding. But I
Yeah.
think soon we are going to get to a point where the computational ability is going to allow us to model more complex things, right? So I think that is going to radically change how companies are going about their, initial R&D, and it's going to help you make smarter bets. And right now, the usual kind of scale of capital is for you to have a proof of concept. You need like around $100 million, right? Which is not trivial money. That's
No.
generation making money. So
Hmm.
so I think data sciences is going to make this, like, getting to a proof of concept much cheaper, by
Yeah.
orders of magnitude, maybe like 20 million, 15 million, something like that. And I think that's going to have a great impact. And I think the other thing that's going to change our industry is the focus on, the efficacy affordability kind of matrix, right? Previously, I think companies were going after, like, hey, I'm going to target efficacy no matter what, and I'm going to care about affordability less, right? And I think that's how you had these expensive gene therapies and cell therapies that are in the market, making significant changes to the patient, but I don't think they are broadly affordable. But I think
Hmm.
the world that we live in 2025, where I think there's a growing understanding of, like, hey, there is a huge gap between people's affordability, kind of, where they are in their life financially. I think there is going to be a bigger push on getting affordable medications to the market. I think those are my two kind of predictions. Let's see how it works out.
Yeah, we'll see. I hope so. Look, this question is really interesting to me. How have biopharma companies improved their financial expertise to refine clinical development strategies in recent years?
So the first thing is, I think, an easy answer is, where do you conduct clinical trials, right? Because previously, most companies used to start the clinical trials in the US, and then if the US readout was great, they will expand to Europe, then to Japan. There was a kind of a cadence to it. Like, if you go back 10 years, that was the playbook. But now what is happening is this concept of how do you get to that kill switch faster, right? Do you need to kill the
Hmm.
program or not? And
That's a
one of the
theme.
things that a lot of biotechs are doing is starting off your clinical trial in the Asia Pacific, right? Because one,
Hmm.
because of the higher population density there, your ability to enroll patients is much faster, right? Like you can enroll patients faster.
Yeah.
And the cost of executing these trials outside, even though there's an initial setup cost because you need to open an office in that part of the world and do the infrastructure stuff, it is still cheaper to get to a proof of concept in Asia Pacific faster. That's why you see a lot of companies going down that path with their phase one right now. To me, that is a significant kind of change in thinking that's happened in the last 3-4 years that I think will continue to do that. And the other thing is also, I think the founders and CEOs, they're getting smarter about what dilution means, right? So I think in a financial sense, you're seeing more companies kind of taking on these like collaboration deals where like they co-develop the drug and the bigger company markets the drug elsewhere, right? Or you kind of have this royalty deal where you take money but you don't give up equity. So I think
Hmm.
that's going to be also an interesting trend that you're going to see because the if you dilute yourself too much, you kind of don't have a lot of options for later stage pivots, right? So I
Yeah.
think companies are going to kind of start doing more of this, like co-development with bigger pharmas. And I think it also for a small biotech, it also helps them open the playbook, right? Like, hey, if you're working really closely with this big pharma company, that's a sign to the industry, right? Like, hey, there's any day this company can come and buy me out. So that kind of makes it like scarcity play as well, which helps you kind of accelerate things into the clinic as well.
Very insightful. Okay. With your strong background in financial analysis, what financial metrics or valuation techniques do you find most critical when evaluating biotech partnerships or investments?
My answer is like is an acronym, and sorry for the jargon. It's POS. It's probability of success. So a lot of times when you're doing these financial modeling work for how good of a partnership is or how good a
Yeah.
deal is, the trickiest part of that model is your probability of success, right? And the challenge with that is it's very tough to say like, hey, what do you think is a probability of success this is going to work out, right? It requires you to understand the science of not just your company but also the partnering company to
Yeah.
see like, hey, I know what my science does, but I need to know what other companies' science does. And when you combine these two, what do I think is going to happen? And then understanding like some of the people aspects, right? Like there are some companies who have a unique culture. Like, hey, how do you think this company is going to work with other company, right? So those are all things that go into developing a POS. And to me, it's the most imperfect art or science that's there in
Oh, yeah.
valuation. And to me, that is the most critical piece of the rest of it is just formulaic, right? Like creating a DCF model has been there for like 50, 60 years now, more
Yep.
than that actually. So
Yep.
it's about the POS. That to me is the most critical metric in these things.
Awesome. Well, look, number one, you're a passionate guy, and I'm so grateful that we were able to get you on this podcast. Also, you're a friend. Glad to have you as a friend and colleague. Uh, this has been episode number 7 of Align Health Insights with Karthik Sriram from Parabolas Medicines. Thank you, everyone, and especially thank you, Karthik. You've really laid down some really interesting things for my audience to think about.
Thank you so much, Mark. Thanks for the time.
All right.
See you.